George Bush was the first one to send to China, representing the United States of America. Well, Bush family have been working with China for decades. And in the Bush family, you see the political wing and the business wing. It's somewhat like Hunter Biden. If you can't do anything, use your family connection and do business, make money. Remember, they only sent their least competent son or daughter to do business. The more competent ones are doing the governing business. The more competent ones are governing us. And the George Bush, W made a speech in Japan, also made like a six-figure, which was big news, but not like Clinton. Clinton is the king of that. The media tried to describe Trump as such a narrow-minded, ignorant, and whatever, enemy-making kind of idiot.
Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host 𝙒𝙖𝙩𝙤𝙦. On this ongoing series about people in the United States with links to China, we have our latest edition, and joining us is Sasha Gong. Sasha, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Happy to see you and thank you so much.
Sasha, always a pleasure to have you with us, and we have opened so many eyes during our conversations as to what happens in the United States, how did it all start, and so on and so forth. So today we are going to talk about a very important topic. Diplomats, and some diplomats went on to also become, part of administrations and so on. So I would yield the floor now to you, and I'm just going to set it up real quick so that we can get cracking on this one. Tell me if you would like me to bring up the first slide now, or you want to talk a little bit before you bring it up.
Yeah, actually, let me talk a little bit about it. Sure. Because I spent some time to prepare for this chapter, and of course, the whole thing is based on Peter Schweizer's book. But throughout years, I have heard so much about how U.S. officials working for the Chinese, and there's tons of reports on it. So today I was thinking of doing a chapter on U.S. high-ranking government officials. And finally, I said I have to limit it to diplomats. Otherwise, it will be everywhere, and it's very hard to group them. So the first slide, the title, U.S. diplomats in China. Not only in China, about China, what they do for China. You see, I put up a bunch of pictures here. Of course, the first one, if you count, you have 4 Secretaries of State and 3 ambassadors. So Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, and Madeleine Albright all happen to be Democrats. Actually, I determined not to do that, but I tried to search the Republican. Oh, actually, 1 Republican, Condoleezza Rice. Yes. I tried to put more Republicans there, and then I researched, realized Republicans like Mike Pompeo, some others, they have no chance, just no chance to work with China because Pompeo is so anti-CCP. But Condoleezza Rice does. So, and the 3 ambassadors I put there, 2 Republican, 1 Democrat. So the Democrat is on the very right-hand side, Gary Locke. He's Chinese American. Actually, ethnic Chinese, he's 3rd generation Chinese. And on top of that, you see the man with white hair, that's Branstad, Trump's ambassador to China. And of course, in the bottom, in the middle of that, we all recognize George Bush. But many people may not realize that George Bush Sr. was our first de facto ambassador to China in 1972. He was the first one after he came back from China. He then became the director of CIA. So that history, I may need to remind the younger generation. Nixon visited China in 1972. And after that, China and the US built a sort of a relationship, but not a diplomatic tie until 1979. So George Bush was the first one to send to China, representing the United States of America. That's a very brief introduction to each one of them.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sasha, because I couldn't pick out some of the names that you mentioned. So you were actually educating me too, and I'm supposed to be your generation. Just shows you how ignorant some of us are. So please go ahead.
The world is huge, and there's so much happened in all these years. So nobody remembers everything. And for me, I don't even know the ambassadors to India. I know a few people like Stephen Hadley, and they made quite important impact in US-India relationship, but I'm quite ignorant on that as well. So let's go to the next slide. There are two lists. I put the list here. Secretary of State. Why I started from 1997? Because before that time, China business was not much. There were US officials working for China in some, but at that time, remember, China was still poor, and China business sort of ignorable in a way. So after that, especially after 2000, we will see more and more high-ranking American officials working for the Chinese. And so you see on the left side, all the names of a list of Secretaries of State. And on the right-hand side, I listed 15 ambassadors to China, starting from actually it should be 1973, George Bush. I think George Bush went there in 1973. Anyway, so those are two long lists. And not everybody in those lists work for the Chinese. As I said, Mike Pompeo did not, and if you see the ambassadors list, lots of them did not work for China, or if they work for China, they work in some sort of very minor role. For example, the first ambassador to China, Woodcock. Woodcock was the chairman of the UAW, the United Auto Workers, and he was the first ambassador appointed by Jimmy Carter to China. I actually met him a few times when he represented US-China Business Council to lobby the US Congress for a little while, and on China's most favored nation status. I don't think he got a lot of money from that, but he did. Well, what I remember, he might be the first one who actually took a role in the China lobby among all the ambassadors. And there are other people I didn't. If I try to list other people working on the foreign policy and diplomatic side, it would create a big trouble. I would not be able to go through it. For example, remember when the pandemic came, 2020, and suddenly all government and private meetings turned into online meetings. The biggest online meeting company is the company named Zoom. And just about that time, Zoom invited a new board member, McMaster, who left the Trump administration as national security advisor. He joined Zoom as Zoom's board member. So now if you look at the Chinese, the big corporations, you go to the big corporations in China, especially those with foreign businesses, talk about Huawei, GTE, and any other companies, and look at the name of the board members, and look at the advisory board, look at the senior advisor, you will find it's a who's who in American politics. Very amazing. A few years ago, a Daily Beast tried to an article on that. They found it's very difficult because, first so many names and the changing names, and then the corporate are very secretive about it. But if you do your research and the research orders, even the companies like Huawei and ZTE, who are on the list of US sanctions, you still find important American politicians working for those companies.
How many of these ambassadors spoke Chinese?
For what I know, 𝙤𝙬𝙤𝙦 is the one who speaks best Chinese. And others, Gary Locke speaks Cantonese, but not Mandarin. And other than that, Winston Lord's wife speaks very good Mandarin. She's from Shanghai. And James Lilly speaks some Mandarin. I met most of them, actually. Other than that, I'm not aware.
And about the Secretary of States?
Secretary of State, I don't think any of them speak any Chinese at all.
Okay.
None of them speak Chinese, then they don't need to. Well, actually, I have a question. How many of them speak Hindu? Ambassador to India. Yeah.
I think the answer might be closer to 0. I think there was one guy, Indian American, who Hillary Clinton had appointed as Secretary of State. And he probably may have spoken Hindi. There was one other American lady during the time of 2012, just before Modi came to power. She spoke Hindi. In fact, she did an interview with Modi on Hindi once he was chosen as the prime ministerial candidate. And if I remember correctly, she was recalled by Obama because of one error that happened. I'm not sure the US is going to own up to this, but I have heard from reliable sources that there was somebody in India telling the United States that there were a lot of skeletons buried in a certain place in Gujarat, trying to say that there was a pogrom in the 2001 riots that took place. I don't know if you remember the 2002 riots that happened in India. It was a communal riot between Hindus and Muslims.
Right. Remember that.
Hundreds died on both sides. And Modi was the chief minister at that point of time. And there were some insinuations against him that he played it up for the masses and so on and so forth. But there was an allegation that there were many more bodies that are buried in a certain place. And I believe that was played up by the US. And then the US actually did a satellite mapping of that area. And they found a lot of bovine skulls, bovine cow, long faces, a place where the cows were buried.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
big carcasses.
I see.
Yeah.
And
and I think something went wrong. Nothing came out, of course. And after that, she came back, and essentially, some people made sure that Modi wouldn't get a visa to come to the United States. The interesting thing is, he didn't even apply for one, but they said he is being refused a visa, and there was active baiting against him in US. Then dispensation of Congress. They had a visceral hatred of Modi because of what you're seeing out now, because he has been systematically defeating them in every state. And I'm afraid there is no proper opposition for the BJP, which is what Modi heads right now. And that's also a concern. In a democracy, you want two strong parties. That's how the democracy functions best.
Yeah.
And right now, the Congress is in a state of deep decline. They call it's in ICU, intensive care. So that's how bad the Congress party is. Anyway,
I see.
Yeah. So good question. I think 2 or 3 did speak Hindi. Basically, in India, not much deep research happens, Sasha.
American diplomat Indians' English is 10 times better than the Chinese. Indian, they're more like native speakers there in English. So
British
they
legacy.
they have less communication problem, but China is a different thing. And for one of them I know is 𝙤𝙬𝙤𝙦, who was Mormon, and he spent at least 2 years in the mission in Taiwan. Speaks very good Chinese, and 𝙤𝙬𝙤𝙦 tried to run for president in 2012,
yes, he did.
If you remember.
Yeah.
Anyway, so these are the 2 lists. So let's go through next. Actually, I did not how to put Henry Kissinger in. Let's go next slide. Henry Kissinger was Secretary of State and was National security advisor. But Kissinger's time, remember he was Secretary of State in 1974, right? 74 and all the way to the fourth administration. Anyway, so after Kissinger, China, the Secretary of State, did not do much business with China, private business, all the way until, Madeleine Albright, who left in 2001. So I was thinking of putting Kissinger in that list, but, there got to be a big gap. So I decided to list him as a separate slide. Actually, he's worth it. And Kissinger, if you talk to people in the China trade, people with, American working in China, everybody appointed at Kissinger. So Kissinger, if you want to know American doing business in China, Kissinger is the one to talk to. So Kissinger so far has done, well, he's still alive. Amazing. I don't know how many Secretary of State after him died, but he's still very much active and alive. Kissinger's reputation, Kissinger is neither a lawyer nor a businessman, before he joined, he was academic. But Kissinger knows one thing very well, and which fits the Chinese. He opens stores. The Chinese in China, it doesn't matter if you do business or do whatever trade you're in, you have to know people. In Chinese language, it is called 关系. And without 关系, you're nobody. So everybody's looking for 关系 and buying 关系. Kissinger has. It's nothing but 关系. And of course, knowledge. Kissinger, if you look at that was the black and white, that was Kissinger with Mao. And Kissinger met in 1971, met with Mao and followed with Nixon's open China policy. And he's actually, the Chinese recognize him to be the one who can persuade Americans in China policy. And well, actually, he lived up to his reputation. If you look at from both China side and America side, every American president, whoever got elected, would go to Kissinger, ask for his advice on China. And in the other side, the Chinese, every Chinese leaders, from Mao to Zhou Enlai to Deng Xiaoping to Jiang Zemin to Hu Jintao to Xi Jinping, everyone met with Kissinger. And everyone wants Kissinger to speak for them. So, and Kissinger does deliver. It's what amazing. And each time when there's trouble in the US-China relationship, doesn't matter it's about trade or it's about South China Sea or whatever, Kissinger would speak out, not on behalf of China, but pro-China. In many ways, we all know Kissinger as someone who always tried to persuade the Americans a good relationship China is good for America. So even he has the reputation of doing so much business in Beijing, and American politicians are still listening to him. That's the importance. And in the Chinese, they quote Kissinger. And the Kissinger actually, in the Chinese reputation, he started with all this pro-China business and politicians and business.
So viewers, I had the opportunity of watching a video link that Sasha sent me, and I'm going to put that in the description because I want you to see that. The more important thing there is this is a spokesperson from a university, I think. It doesn't matter. Yes. I mean, he's very articulate. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
The university is called the major party school in China.
Yes. So thank you. And what he does is he's laying out a platform, a rationale, a reasoning as to why China needs to trade with the other countries in its currency, renminbi. And his arguments are very convincing, by the way. He says that if Chinese businesses who don't have native insurance, they have to rely on the American and the West to give them the insurance policy and protection. Now, if for any reason all of them go down for like a natural catastrophe, the bill on the insurance companies looking like 3 trillion, and the insurance companies can't pay up. They are just going to go under. Either that, or they'll say we'll stop doing this, or they will not agree to pay that. So it sounds very interesting. Although my take on that, Sasha, is the entire country never gets smashed unless there's a meteor or something like that. But he was trying to make the argument that it is better for China and Chinese interests to have its own insurance industry than its own currency. And we have been seeing this for a while now. The digital renminbi. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, something he mentioned several times, and I will send you a more sort of a clarified video list in the same talk. And he mentioned that the Chinese have people, American officials in high places speaking for them. He said they always get things done. All these Americans get things done for the Chinese. Remember this person whose last name is 𝙒𝙧𝙤𝙤. He's not only a professor. He was one of the mastermind of the Chinese diplomacy, and he said he always gets things done because whenever there's some US-China conflict or things need to get done, they will send him out to get things done. So anyway, but Henry Kissinger was the first one to get things done. And in that video, he mentioned one very interesting incident. He said when 2015 or when Xi Jinping before Xi Jinping visited the United States, they had to clear the field for him, to set the stage for him. When they set the stage, they premium promote Xi Jinping's book in Politics and Pro. People in Washington would know Politics and Pro is perhaps one of the most important gathering place for book launching. So they try to launch the book, but Xi Jinping's book, the owner of the store says, sorry, we already, that slot is occupied. Somehow they found a lady who was in the investment business and gave lots of money and cleared the field, and they took that spot, which was close to being impossible. Anyway, this is symbolically quite important. For
yes.
And he was in his speech showing off how China can manipulate the United States through all these high-ranking people. So let's go after Kissinger. Let's go to the next Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright. Madeleine Albright, again, she was a professor, was a diplomat. She had no business background. Clinton's Secretary of State and the first female Secretary of State in the history of the United States. Well, after she left the post in 2001, she started a group called Albright, later become Albright Stonebridge Group. And his partner was the man in the picture, Sandy Berger. Sandy Berger was Clinton's national security advisor. Well, when we go through the presentation today, you will see how the Republicans and the Democrats, they group together not only making money, but making influence in the future. They group their people, they groom their people for the future. So here what you see is that I put 3 pictures in, and you see Sandy Berger there, and down there you see Linda, oh gosh, her name just skipped. Well, the current Secretary, United States Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas. Anyway, She also works for that group, usually called ASG Group, Albright Stonebridge Group. And that I have that sentence here, which is from their own website. It said, the China practice is the firm's largest single country practice, with full-time senior level professionals based in Beijing, Shanghai, and Washington, D.C. Remember, they only mentioned 2 cities in China and 1 city, the capital, in the United States. Our team of 30 professionals supports clients across a wide variety of sectors. Actually, they said they have a team of 30 people. Among 30 of them, 14 of them are working in the China field, headed by a former Chinese official. Wow. And what they serve, their service across your energy, food industry, shipping, all sorts of whatever business they take or business. And I have no idea how much money they make from China, but we are talking about hundreds of millions throughout years.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and not only that, in the current administration, of course, the ambassador in current administration, and lots of people, high-ranking people in the State Department came from that group. So you see how government and the business, they treat it as a swing door. One day you work in the government, build all the connections you can build. Next day, you work in private business, making fabulous money. This is one example we see here.
I have a question for you, Sasha. Sorry,
yes.
You just struck me, man. I think it's important to remember this. Under Trump administration, wasn't there a dialing back a little bit of these kinds of influence peddling firms?
Actually, well, Trump wanted that, but did not really happen. Well, President Trump had a tremendous problem dealing with the bureaucracy. And for example, in the beginning, Trump said, well, Trump wants to make an order. If you work for the White House, after you leave the White House, for 5 years, you cannot work for a foreign company. But that never actually became the law. Normally, it's 1 year. Remain 1 year because I knew many people, actually I knew a bunch of them who actually left and worked for foreign companies a year after. And not only that, Trump could only control the White House and to some extent the administrative branch. And if you talk about Congress, talk about people working for the Chinese government. The firm, Patent and Box, represent the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C. You know who works for them? John Boehner.
No. Oh,
John
wow.
Boehner.
Speaker of the House.
Speaker of the House. And he's only one. There are several other congressmen working for them. So they are representing the Chinese embassy in the United States. Honestly, I really don't see much change after that. As I mentioned, McMaster worked for Zoom immediately after he left the White House, I think 2 or 3 months. Nobody's stopping him. And I don't know how much it paid because it's private business. It's all kept in secret. And another one who working, in some firm related to China is also James Mattis, Secretary of Defense. Is now working in a firm, I forgot which firm, because you have to forgive me, there's so many. All these firms are working over. It's very hard for me to remember everybody.
Of course, understood.
But I come across, the data. Let's go to the next group. Next group, I put Republicans there, and it's the Bush family. Bush family have been working with China for decades. And in the Bush family, you see the political wing and the business wing. George Herbert Walker Bush, the Bush senior. He's a politician. He later became president, and And he never worked in the China business himself. But his brother, Prescott Bush, did.
I thought Prescott Bush was his father.
Father is Prescott's brother is also Prescott.
Oh, okay.
Father was Senator Prescott.
Yes.
So when you talk
understood.
Yeah.
Understood. So viewers, you know how in Indian culture we name our children after our grandfather. So there's a skip in one generation, but in the West, they call them the children are named after the father, and then they put a junior at the end to say that this is the junior. So please go ahead. Yeah.
In China, never happens. Your father's name is supposed to be it's forbidden to say your father's name traditionally. So no way you name your, the Chinese have another naming system. So Prescott Bush actually worked with the Chinese telecom companies, energy and the different sectors. He went to China quite often. And he said even in his 80s, he went to China twice and 3 times a year doing business. And it's very quiet. Everybody knows it, but you're not supposed to talk about it. So the Chinese actually rarely talk about it. He doesn't show up in the Chinese media quite much, but that business is quite well known. But the more pro-China business and a China business person is another brother, not the senior, it's George W. Bush brother. You see, in his generation, you have Jeb Bush, you have W. They are both politicians, and one become president twice, and one tried to run for president. But they have a brother whose name's Neil Bush. Neil Bush had lots of trouble, like in divorce and drinking, whatever trouble he had. He's the business person. Worse are, this Bush could not do much, in politics and other fields, so he had to do business. It's somewhat like Hunter Biden. If you can't do anything, use your family connection and do business, make money. They make fabulous money. And Neil Bush, I actually have his cell phone, possess his cell phone because I once tried to interview him. Anyway, and the reason I want to do a profile interviewing him was about 10, 15 years ago. Anyway, he appeared in Chinese media quite a lot. He appears in Chinese CCTV and Central TV and the local TV and newspapers. He accepts interviews from official Chinese media a lot. He denied my request of interview on behalf of Voice of America. Isn't that ironic?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the Chinese media, people know he's pretty easy to reach. If you give him exposure in China, interview him on his business, say something good about China, he is available. Voice of America, of course not. And at least I know telecom, energy, shipping, all kind of business. I can't find any records of how much money he actually made, but I found record of one of his deals. One telecom company is $400,000 per year, just sitting there. Yeah, it's only one deal. He made many deals. So that's
Sasha,
Bush family.
We're killing ourselves to make 100 that money.
I know. Remember, they only sent their least competent son or daughter to do business. The more competent ones are doing the governing business. The more competent ones are governing us and using their influence. They send least competent family members to earn money. Look at the Joe Biden family, same thing. You have Beau Biden, who was a decent person, as what I heard, and he was assigned to do politics, became Attorney General. And Joe Biden, when he wanted to run for president and want his son to be the senator, but he died, unfortunately. And who they sent to do business? Hunter Biden, the least competent sibling, who's doing drug and having women problem, drug problem, drinking problem, whatever problem. That's the one for business. So we all know companies don't hire them for their competence. Companies hire them for connection. And anyone denying it is deceived. The intention is deceiving. Well, anyway, so let's go to the next slide. The next big slide also. I put the Clintons there because Hillary Clinton, at least, she was Secretary of State, and she was diplomat in that sense, a top diplomat. The Clintons had a different way to make money compared to the Bushes. I learned throughout years that records of like Clinton's brother, Roger Clinton, and Hillary's brother, what's his name? They all tried to do business in China quite unsuccessfully. In a way, yeah, because those are real incompetent people, real incompetent. Like I know Hillary Clinton's brother was trying to launch a multi-million-dollar to attract Chinese investment immigrants, and he was working with Terry McAuliffe. So he went in China, made a speech, but people said, okay, so what? Then did not invest. So quite unsuccessful. But the Clintons are very successful in one business, which is making speeches. When Bill Clinton went to China the first time in early 2000, made a speech in Shenzhen, that was in history the most expensive speech anyone made in history, $250,000. And later, he was making multiple speeches in China, sometimes like 2 speeches, more than $500,000 a day. And actually, in that time, the reports from China, that time, the American president's salary was $200,000 a year. So the report said Clinton made more than twice of his salary within one day. And later, the most expensive speech Clinton made, $750,000, one speech. I can't find records of how many speeches Clinton made and how much he earned from China. But we all know it's millions, many millions. And lots of speeches are in public, but lots of speeches are in private, for business school, for trade association or something. So those speeches did not even appear in the media. I have no idea. But Bill Clinton made a record of money making and wealth creation by making speeches in China.
Sasha, before China became so important, the same ex-presidents used to fly to Japan and they would get paid for their speeches, right?
Yes, but not much. I remember Ronald Reagan, when, we are talking about ex-presidents, right? Once Reagan made $20,000 in Japan in 1990 or something. It's quite small amount compared to later. And George Bush, W made a speech in Japan, also made like a 6-figure, which was big news, but not like Clinton. Clinton is the king of that.
You got to be good at something, I guess.
He's good. He's good at making speeches. That I don't deny. Clinton is quite much. Lot of fun to listen to. I listened to him in person several times. It's quite fun to listen to. And I think for all the presidents, the first time I listened to Reagan on TV was his Berlin Wall speech. I just came from China that time. I cried like a baby. Next, George, the 2 Bushes, not much. And Clinton was quite some. Obama quite a speaker. And while Trump is always fun to listen to, I listened to Trump in person at least 30 times because I was covering his campaign. And each one has a different communication style. We can talk about it in another show. But Trump, if you watch him on TV, was so-so. But if you see him in person, he was communicating with his audience quite different, and Clinton too. So it's just their style. But Clinton made quite a wave in China.
Sasha, you have an open carte blanche, time slot on PGurus. Anytime, any topic you want to talk about it, share your thoughts. The floor is all yours. You're such a pleasure to listen to. So let's go on. Is there another slide left after this, or is this the last one?
Yes, go to the next slide. We go to another Secretary of State. But if you look at the picture, well, ignore the first woman. She's relatively junior, but she does all the work. And if you look at the man, there is Steve Hadley, and Bush W's National Security Advisor. And then, of course, Condoleezza Rice. And then the one next, if people remember me, that's Bob Gates, Secretary of Defense. They are in business together. If you look at, these are very, very powerful people, right? And what they do is that they work on energy. They concentrate. The Bush family, remember, these are Bush people.
Yes,
and
oil man.
And also oil man, right? Bob Gates also worked in Texas, was the president of Texas AMN. Steve Hadley is a lawyer, and Condoleezza Rice is Soviet experts. But they focus on working on the energy sector. And they also have a China department working with China. I have to disclose a little bit. Steve Hadley is a personal friend. So if I don't say, he's a nice guy. I don't know anything bad about him, but as a journalist, I have to say something here, right?
Absolutely,
so I have to disclose.
Yes.
Anyway.
And who's the last person, Sasha?
Bob Gates.
No.
Oh, you mean the woman? The woman on the, she was working for the State Department. She was a diplomat. And her name, at least I never heard her name before she joined the firm. I know in the beginning it was Hadley, Condoleezza Rice, and Bob Gates. They started the firm, and she joined later. That's one very interesting detail. One story I want to tell, and
yes.
I'm not sure if that story is well known. When Trump was elected in 2016, Trump did not know many, during his campaign, people said, you got to form a cabinet. You got to name your people. Trump said, no, that's bad luck. So Trump actually was elected not prepared. And remember, in that time, Trump was going everywhere to look for candidates for his cabinet. So Condoleezza Rice, if you just think back the history, only about 10 days before the election, she issued a statement. And she said, well, Republicans should replace Trump with some other candidate because of that NBC's disclosed scandal, whatever. She issued a statement. So she did not vote for Trump. And in a way, judging from what she said, she hated Trump, one of the never Trumpers. So very interestingly, is after Trump was elected, Trump was looking for a Secretary of State. And Trump went to Condoleezza Rice, which said something about Trump.
Yes.
And Condoleezza Rice gave Trump a suggestion, said, well, Rex Tillerson, who's, of course, the head of Exxon.
Yes.
Rex Tillerson is a very good guy and can deal with things calmly, great manager. So that's how Trump picks Rex Tillerson as his Secretary of State.
Wow.
Yeah.
We learn something new every day.
Yeah, that story, I found it's amazing because, it got reported once or twice, but that story was generally unknown because, the media tried to describe Trump as such a narrow-minded, ignorant, and whatever, enemy-making kind of idiot.
Actually, I have met him once, Sasha, and he's a very nice person to talk to.
Yes,
I mean, he's pretty quick on the draw. I mean, he's very, very smart. He knows how to, connect. He knows how to engage. So please go ahead.
Yeah. So anyway, these are people who are also doing business with China. And let's go to the next, and I think the last slide.
Yes.
Since we are in the last slide, I think I'm allowed to do some sort of tabloid type of rumor.
Absolutely.
It's not totally tabloid. It has good source. So let's quickly go through this Branstad, the first, one on the left upper side. He was ambassador to China in the Trump administration. Before that, he was governor of Iowa. Interestingly, if you look at the picture of him with Xi Jinping, when that picture was taken, they met like 26 something times. Xi Jinping knew Branstad in the 1980s when Xi Jinping first visited the United States, and he was a very young cadre then, and he stayed in Iowa for a month or so. He met Branstad. That's why Trump nominated Branstad to be the Chinese ambassador, and said he has the personal relationship with Xi Jinping. And I think his son is doing business with China, and they are doing business with China for sure. And if you look at down there, the left-hand side is Max Baucus. Baucus, Democrat before he was appointed as Obama's ambassador to China. He was a senator. And I actually bumped into him before he went to China. And the funny thing is that he was Democrat. He is still Democrat. And I somehow bumped into him in the Republican Club in Capitol Hill, the Capitol Club, and a bunch of Republican senators and congressmen are having lunch with him. At that time I was thinking, why the Republicans are having dinner with him? But anyway, after he left his China post, he's now again as a pattern, launch a China business, launch a consulting business, and work with China. Many issues. We should not be surprised by that pattern. Okay, now let's go to the picture on the right. Well, that's Ambassador Gary Locke and his wife, Mona Lee. Here's some very interesting story. Ambassador Gary Locke is the third generation American. His grandfather came from Toisan, and my mother came from Toisan as well. So he could speak some Toisanese and Cantonese. And I heard he could read some Chinese, that much. Anyway, he has a Chinese background, and he was Obama's ambassador to China before Max Baucus. Anyway, Gary Locke, before that, he was governor of Washington State. His wife, Mona Lee, was Miss Asian USA in the 1980s. Very beautiful woman. You can see she's a very beautiful woman. Anyway, so they got married. At that time, she was a TV anchor. The marriage was sort of quite a story because Gary Locke hired a helicopter and dropped a big flyer from sky, proposed to her, said, "Mona, I love you." So the marriage was a very romantic story. They have 3 children. Anyway, he went to China in 2000, I think it's 2011, after Obama, that time. In that time, the Chinese media, the State Department has some rules. So if the flight is longer than 13 hours, you can purchase business class. Otherwise, you have to fly coach. That sort of rule. So he flew to China. That airplane was like 12 hours or something like that. Anyway, Gary Locke through his family coach. That time, it makes big news in China. The Chinese media attacked him, said, well, he was just making a show. America's it's so fake. He can't afford first class or business class. Now he flew coach to show how clean it was, something like that, which is very, very laughable. Gary Locke went to China. In the beginning, he was sort of stand firm to China. Even in Obama's time, he helped some dissidents and also that sort of story. And gradually, he mingled with Chinese a lot. And suddenly, 2 years later, very sudden, his wife, 3 years later, his wife announced they're getting a divorce, angry divorce. So here's the rumor part. In the Chinese media, tons of reports, and said Gary Locke was having an affair with some Chinese lady, and with names, and one of them is a TV anchor. Anyway, beautiful women, both of them, with two women. Well, that's just a rumor, but anyway, they divorced, and she left China, came back to the States, and he stayed in China a little bit and resigned and went back to America. And then immediately he went back to his old law firm doing, guess what? China business. Yeah, lobby, consulting, whatever. It's all in China business. So now, so far, I think we can see a pattern here. A pattern is that American politicians, American diplomats, after they serve China, serve the United States, well, they have no hesitation to go to business. I remember once a few years ago, I was attending a conference in Taiwan with some American young diplomats there. And also there, I think in Hong Kong, I forgot. Anyway, in Taiwan, the American General Counsel in Hong Kong was also there. And his colleagues whispered to my ears, he said, I bet you that guy, the counsel, that guy will join Chinese business board and do that right after he left his post. And then he added, every one of them did. And I came back and checked the American consulate, checked the consul name. The young man was right. Everyone did. So this is how it works. Yeah.
Wonderful, Sasha. And see, the country is being sold on a platter. And when it was to smaller countries, maybe the damage wasn't as bad as it is with China, because China has managed to infiltrate just about every institution in the United States. And this is something that's very apparent to you and I. For some reason, many people refuse to admit the truth. It is staring them in the face. And you're seeing the actions. America hasn't decisively moved against China for the virus. They haven't even decisively moved to locate the source of the virus. So you're seeing how many walls are being put in front of them, placed in front of them. And China went and occupied Hong Kong, and nobody even, broke stride. It's very, very, very sad, very sad how far they have reached inside. Sasha, let's again meet in a few days when we have going to discuss the next segment. Viewers, we are about maybe halfway in there. And there are very many more people, many more industry segments that we're going to talk. In conclusion, if you would like to say something, Sasha?
I guess it's a very depressing note, I understand. But I think it's time for Americans to wake up and for the whole world to wake up.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. And please do like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And do click on the bell button for notifications. Thank you very much, Sasha. Namaskar.
Thank you.
Thank you.